All right, so absolute value formula. Y equals tells us that we're graphing this, right? We have been working on linear equations when we did this. It was y equals, and then we used that information to make a graph. This one looks a little bit different because it's absolute value. So it's going to be y equals a, and then I'm going to do the absolute value bar, x minus h, and that's the absolute value. So the absolute value of x minus h plus k. Now again, we're going to do open note over this. So you need to have this written down. We need to write down what these elements mean because it's different from y equals mx plus b. Also, please remember that a function, instead of y equals, it might say f of x equals a times the absolute value of x minus h plus k. Same formula, just one of them is written in y equals form and the other one is written in function notation, f of x equals. So remember, the x and the y in the formula mean we graph it, right? It's the ordered pair x, y. The x and the y are our ordered pair. The x is the input, and the y is the output. If I have the number 3 and I put 3 into the problem, my answer y is the output, what comes out of the problem, the solution, the answer. All right, so this a value up in front, if there's a number in front of the absolute value, the coefficient of the absolute value, if a is greater than 1, if the absolute value of a is greater than 1, could you give me an example? 2, 15, negative 1,000, because it's the absolute value, right? If the absolute value of a, if the a value, the absolute value of that number, is greater than 1, it's narrower. It makes our graph narrower. Not necessarily smaller, but if that's kind of how you want to think about it. And the larger that number is, the more narrow. So like 5 is skinnier than 2. A is the slope of the right side. A is the slope of the right side. If A is 5, the slope on the right side is 5, up 5 over 1. If A is 2.5, the slope on the right side is up 2.5 over 1. If A is between, if the absolute value of A is between 0 and 1, so what kind of number is between 0 and 1? What kind of decimal? 0.5 or 1/2. 0.75 or 3/4. It's most likely going to be in a fraction. If it's between 0 and 1, it's wider. and it's the slope on the right side still. So a number that's between 0 and 1 would be 3/4, correct? Meaning up 3 over 4. Up 3 over 4. 1/2 up 1 over 2. 7/8. Negative 5/6. Make it wider. Larger than 1, greater than 1 is narrower. Between 0 and 1 is wider. If it's negative a, which can fit in either one of these, right? Because these are absolute values. But if your a value is negative, it's reflected. It's upside down. Which makes sense. If your slope is negative 3/4, that means down 3 over 4. And if your slope is positive 3/4, that means up 3 over 4. And again, it's the slope on the right side.
I got it that time.
Good job. What does vertex mean? Anyone remember that vocabulary word?
No.
A square has 4 vertices.
They're edge points. Oh, yeah.
They're not edges.
Corners.
Corners.
Sides.
A vertex is the corner or the point.
Get your point.
It's so funny, Tia.
The vertex is the turning point in our graph. Because I keep saying on the right side, right? I said on the right side, on the right side, on the right side, implying that there's also a left side.
Outside.
Because, you guys, in an absolute value, how many answers does an absolute value have?
All, every.
How many?
Infinite.
5.
2.
Oh.
There's the positive version of it. The absolute value of 10 is 10, right? But the absolute value of negative 10 is also 10. There are 2 ways of getting an answer. An absolute value has, for the most part, an equation is going to have 2 answers. The vertex, the corner, the turning point, the middle, is H, comma, K.
Height.
Do you recognize, do you see those anywhere else?
Yeah.
In the formula.
Height and. Kinetic. That's cool.
H, comma, K, which is X, comma, Y. It's an ordered pair. Now remember that this negative is in the formula. So the minus is in the formula. So if this said minus 3, my H value is 3. The minus stays in the formula. The vertex is the corner. The vertex is the corner, the turning point, the division between the left and the right side. And here's my values, H and K. The axis of symmetry, symmetry means that if I folded it in half, it would line up.
Yep.
The vertex is the line of reflection. If something's 2 spaces to the left of the vertex, there's going to be something that's 2 spaces to the right of the vertex. The vertex, the turning point, the corner, is our line of reflection. It's what we reflect over. All right, so we're going to talk about graphing these. There are a couple of ways of graphing them. If and when you graph, one thing you could do first is find the vertex and graph it. The vertex is the h comma k. The vertex is the h comma k. So what's being added inside the absolute value or subtracted inside the absolute value, and what's being added outside. So find the vertex and graph it. So let's look down here. Here's my equation. What's being added inside? 0. And what's being added outside? 0. Beautiful. It is the origin in this one. There's my vertex, meaning that's the corner. Then you're going to pick 2 numbers to the right of the vertex to substitute. You could pick to the left of the vertex. However, when you go to the left of the vertex, you run the risk of picking a negative number. Negative numbers are numbers too. They're fine. However, you guys tend to make more mistakes with negative numbers than you do with positive numbers. So, here's my vertex. Someone raise your hand. I want 2 numbers to the right. Landon, what's your first number? 10. So, he said 10. It's to the right of it. So, I'm going to substitute. So, over here, instead of x, I'm going to put in 10. What's the absolute value of 10?
10.
So there's my first order pair. 10, 10. Someone else, raise your hand. Tell me another number. Another number to the right of the vertex. Taylor? 6. The absolute value of, put in 6. The absolute value of 6 is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right there. Pick 2 numbers to the right of the vertex to substitute. Step 3. Reflect over the axis of symmetry, which is right here. This is my vertex. This is my line of symmetry. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one is 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Spaces to the side. And there it is. There's a left side and a right side. So if we look, my A value was actually just 1, correct?
Yep.
So it doesn't fit in any of these. This is called the parent function. This is like the most beautiful absolute value function. It's perfect. And if you notice, my A value was 1. It's positive, so it opens up. And the A value, the A value, the A value, the A value is the slope on the right side. What was my A value?
On the right side.
What was my A value?
Left side.
What was my A value? 1. So my slope is 1 over 1. Up 1 over 1, 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 up 1 over, right? Another way you could do this is you could have a table and I could substitute. So if my x value is -5,
Your y is -5.
No, what's the absolute value of negative 5? 5. And if you look, negative 5, positive 5 is on my line. What's the absolute value of negative 1? 1. Negative 1, positive 1 is on the line. Absolute value of 0. 0. 0, 0. Absolute value of 2. 2, 2. Absolute value of 7. 7, 7. Again, this is, let's write that on here. This is the parent function. It is the perfect function. It's the function that we compare all other functions to. Why couldn't you be more like this function? No. So let's try this guy. So let's identify the vertex in this function. The vertex h, comma, k, right? In this equation, what's your vertex? H, k. H is the number inside the absolute value. K is the number outside. What's the value inside, Zaya?
That'd be -1.
Not negative. The minus belongs in the equation. So it's 1. Comma. What's the value outside the absolute value? 4. That's my vertex. That's my turning point. That's also my axis of symmetry. If I go over 1 and up 4, right there. And this is what I'm reflecting across, yes? All right, so the slope on the right side. The slope on the right side is A. What's the slope on the right side?
1/4.
Nope. What's my A value in this equation?
-2.
Negative 2 over 1. What do you know about this graph? Which way is it going to open? It's going to open down. Why is it going to open down? Because A is negative. Is it going to be narrower or wider? Narrower. Why is it going to be narrower? Because between 0 and 1, the absolute value of 0 and 1 is wider. This one is the absolute value of A is greater than 1, so it's going to be narrower. Here we go. From this point, from this vertex, we're going to count the slope, which is negative 2 over 1. Go down 2 over 1. Down 2 over 1. I'm going to keep doing it because the more dots I have, the straighter my line is. So if my slope on my right side is negative 2 over 1, what do you think the slope on the left side is going to be? Yeah, it's going to be positive 2 over 1. It's the opposite. Wait a second. Positive 2 over 1. Oh, is that the same thing as negative 2 over negative 1? Because it has to open down. Meaning, I'm going to reflect it, go down 2, backward 1, down 2, backward 1, backward 1, down 2, backward 1. It's the opposite. No, this is not. The only parent one is y equals the absolute value of x. Because if you look at it, is this narrower than this guy? Yeah. And it opens down because it has a negative a value. Maximum is the top number if it opens down. The minimum is the bottom number if it opens up. So in that orange graph that we just made, it has a maximum. In this orange graph that we made, it has a maximum because it opens down. So the maximum, the absolute top number, in the pink one, it has a minimum because it opens up. The absolute bottom, the minimum. What's the maximum value? What's the maximum? What's the top of that graph? 4. Where does that come from? The vertex. What value in the vertex?
1, 4.
The one outside.
The one outside, the K value. Right? So it's the top K number or Y number. And the minimum is the bottom K or Y number. The Y tells you the minimum or the maximum. All right, let's practice finding this stuff. Here's an equation. What's the vertex? Inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside. What's inside the absolute value?
0.
0. Comma, what's outside?
-7.
-7. Good. Let's do all of our vertices first. Inside, outside, inside, outside, inside, outside. Input, out, right? If that helps you remember it. It's not really the output, but what's inside the absolute value? 5. Remember the minus stays behind. Good. And what's outside? 2. Inside, outside. What's inside?
0.
What's outside? Ooh. What's inside?
It's 2. 6.
So,
It's 19.
let's pretend this isn't here. Let's make it a little bit easier on ourselves. It's x plus 3, but the minus stays behind. So it's -3. What's outside? 0. Let's take out that coefficient. What's inside? 3, because the minus stays. What's outside? -3. What's inside? There's a 1 inside, right? But I have to leave a negative behind, so -1 and 0.
So you just make it the opposite?
Yes, that's exactly what it's.
All right, let's talk about transformations.
Hold on. Actually,
Does it open up or down?
up.
Up.
So how we also
Is it narrower, wider, or the same?
narrower.
Narrower. Can't put the ER, sorry. What's the slope? 5/1, meaning up 5/1. Up 5/1. Yes? Okay, let's do this one. Opens up or down? Opens up. Y opens up. What's the A value?
0.
Not 0.
1.
1. It's hard to go back and forth between that 0 and 1. If there's nothing there right here, it's a 0. But if there's nothing there in this location, it's a 1. Narrow, smaller, narrow, wider, or the same? Well, what makes it narrower?
If it's anything.
If it's greater than 1. What makes it wider?
If it's between 0 and 1.
If it's between 0 and 1. It's the same.
Done in that. And then it's multiple over 1.
This guy opens up or down?
Down. No.
Up, because it's what kind of number? Positive. Narrow, wider, same.
Wider.
Because
Between 0
between 0
and 1.
and 1. What about this guy? Up or down?
Down.
Because it's negative. Narrow, wider, same.
Narrow.
Because
It's not between 0 and 1.
because it's greater than 1. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4, which is greater than 1. The slope is negative 4 over 1. Negative 4 over 1. Up or down?
Down.
Narrow, wider, same.
No.
What is the A value?
Negative 1.
Negative 1. What's the absolute value of negative 1?
1.
So same. Near or open, up or down?
Up.
Because
Positive.
it's positive. Narrow, wider, same.
Wider. Narrow. Narrower.
Narrower. It's a fraction. I thought fractions were wider.
No, because it's 4 over 3.
4 over 3.